Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our second episode of Nickleby, the miniseries, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock. I am your marketing manager and co-host of this duet review, Mackenzie, and I'm joined by our literary manager, resident dramaturg, and my co-producer of all things The Cup, including this miniseries, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. Nice to rejoin you 1 week later.
Yes, 1 week
discussing
later.
This production.
Yes, yes. For anybody just tuning in, Ryan and I are covering the 1983 filmed version of the RSC production of Nickleby. We're doing this through Broadway HD, and Broadway HD has broken it down hour by hour. This is normally an 8-9 hour play. Broken into two parts, and Broadway HD's broken it into hour segments. So we are on hour number 2 of our epic watch of this epic play. So Ryan, why don't we first kind of catch our audiences up on what's happened in this episode?
First, before we do that, what is in your cup?
Oh my goodness, Ryan! It's so early in the morning. I still haven't finished my cup of Earl Grey tea from my official the Cup of Hemlock cup.
Ooh, fancy.
And how about you, good sir? What is in your cup?
Well, I too have my official The Cup of Hemlock cup. Actually, not the one with the cup on the background, just the Cup of Hemlock logo. And I am drinking coffee from it. So, yeah, it's morning. We are doing this one bright and early. Also, we should clarify for anyone who is, in fact, just tuning in now, you can watch episode 1 of this series by clicking on something that's popping up in the top corner of the screen. Don't know where I'm pointing.
Yes.
And we will put a link to Broadway HD's viewing of the actual production if you would like to follow along week by week with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's catch everybody up. So last week, we kind of got introduced to a lot.
Nickleby.
Exactly. Previously, we started our tale. Nickleby and his mother and sister Kate arrived in London to see his uncle Ralph, because Nickleby's father had died. When he arrived in London, Ralph sent Nickleby off to Yorkshire to go work for Mr. Squeers at his school. Mr. Squeers. And at the school, he met his good friend Smike. So that was happening there. And then in the meantime, Ralph was planning to move Kate and Nickleby's mother out of their current lodgings with Ms. Nickleby, the painter, the portrait painter.
Who I'm glad got to have a little cameo in this episode. I was worried we'd never see her again. And
she comes back quite a bit.
They're clearly hinting at that, because she even says, like, as they're doing their mournful goodbye, like, you can't shake me off so easily. I shall see you often. Come and call. Because she's a fun character, so I'm glad they're not just, she's gone. She is elsewhere.
No, don't worry. She'll be making a comeback. So that was kind of what happened in that episode. I mean, we got to see how Mr. Squeers runs his horrible school, feeding his children molasses and brimstone, beating them, basically extorting these children's families for money. And then at the end, Nickleby meets Smike, or actually kind of meets him up in the attic, and they kind of have a connection with each other. And then and then we get right into this episode. So Ryan, where does this episode start?
So this episode is kind of broken into sections a little bit. The first sort of extended section of it is this, we could call it a weird double date between with Nicholas and Squeers' daughter Fanny, who he does not realize that he's dating, but she seems to think that he's madly in love with her. And her friends Tilda and John are having this weird double date in the attic while her parents are away. And so there's this like strange comic sequence of, I guess you could call it dramatic irony,
Yes.
of Nicholas having no idea that this girl is so obviously into him. He's just so hilariously oblivious. But
Yeah.
he's also but he's also very attracted to her friend Tilda, who
Yes.
is much prettier, and
Yes,
but
she
is
is.
also there with her fiance John, who's a real rough and tumble guy, played by, as we just determined before we started filming, Bob Peck, who keen-eyed viewers might remember as Muldoon from Jurassic Park, the Clavago guy.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was a fun little...
Shoot her!
Yeah. So, Clavago, indeed, it might be summing up his, side-eye glances at his fiance flirting with our protagonist. So they have this weird, like, awkward card game.
Yes. What were they playing? Were they playing bridge?
I assumed it was bridge. I've never played bridge myself to like recognize the signifiers.
I've played it a few times, and I think that's what it is. I think so because like they were playing for a certain number of hearts and things like that, and you do play that game in pairs. You do need you do need a pair.
So they were doing.
We'll say bridge.
Card game with partners.
Yeah.
Nicholas was very quick to say, "Hey, Tilda, you'll be my partner."
Yes.
Fanny, you? No, thank you. And they were like doing weird flirty stuff with like the 2 hearts. Hearts, you say? Diamonds?
Yeah.
Oh my. Much to the chagrin of their dates.
Yeah. Very much so.
So then rude words are exchanged, big fight between the ladies. They reconcile. Then Nicholas goes out to brood, as he does because he's so moody.
He's a teenager.
Runs into these, kind of. He's like, what, 19? He's basically an adult.
Yeah, but we all know how moody, like, young, like, 19, 18-year-olds can be.
Yeah. So
he goes off
there. So he goes off to brood when he runs into the ladies again.
Yes.
And Fanny decides to faint onto him, which is really funny because it knocks him right over. He is not prepared to catch her.
Yes.
And then when she makes her attraction to him even more known than she had very unsubtly done prior, he absolutely destroys her, kind of, with like this weird ranty monologue about how he couldn't even begin to think to find her attractive. Like, wow.
Yes.
That was like a moment for me that was like, are we supposed to like him? Because like, sure, she's unappealing and overbearing and, her parents are literal child abusers, but like, and she seems to be cool with all of that. But like... that felt like a real low blow for our protagonist. Like I'm like I hope he redeems himself. I can't tell if either Dickens or Edgar or Rees for that matter think he's supposed to be relatable and charming in that moment, or is this like a wow dickish protagonist who will be redeemed by the end?
Well, he was redeemed like a few scenes later with what happens with Smike.
Well, yes, but like those are kind of unrelated things. He seems to have a soft spot for Smike from the very beginning. He has, to me as a protagonist, he has this weird sense of like blinders of this is a person I like and sympathize with, and this other person is subhuman, and like there's very little gray area between those two poles, and he like has a weird light switch brain about empathy, no empathy, and it's kind of just weird. Like I don't think his sympathy for Smike that we'll get to in a minute it really redeems the fact that wow, you have no tact whatsoever in dealing with someone you're not attracted to who happens to have a crush on you, you crazy guy.
Yes.
So anyway, that was a whole sequence there, and then we back to London. We follow up with Kate, who has recently taken up a job. Are they milliners? Are they tailors or seamstresses?
The book says they're milliners.
Okay, so
according to my very big Dickens book. It says here, Mr. Mantinelli is a dressmaker.
A dressmaker.
According to this book.
Okay, well, if you can't trust that book.
But I mean, that being said, like, either way, he works with fabrics. He does clothing. He's a milliner. Yeah. He's a dressmaker. That's his thing.
Yeah. So Kate has taken up employment with this couple that runs some kind of
thanks to her
business.
Uncle Ralph, who sent her there.
And Ralph has business relations with these people, the Mantelinis, who, from their immediate first appearance are just kind of ridiculous people, but in the fun, sort of charming way.
Yes.
Mr. Mantellini is just like a big foppish goof. And his wife is introduced to us sobbing about how she thinks he's, having an affair with someone else, and he assures her
the other
that
shop
he's
girls,
not. Yeah. He assures her there's not, and then instantly begins flirting with Kate. So do we trust his honor? Probably not.
Yeah.
But then Mrs. Mantinelli goes into strict business mode right away. She, which I thought was like a great character turn for the performer who plays her, which I wrote down her name, Thelma Whiteley.
Yes, Thelma Whiteley.
Yeah, we expect her to kind of just be like a sobbing kind of fool from her introduction, and then what's that new employee? Okay, business, like interesting layers.
It's very much like Dickens took his characters of the Sowerberries, who are the Undertakers in Oliver Twist, and he split them in half. So you take the comedic aspect of the Sowerberries, give that to the Mantinellis. You take the horrible, abusive aspect of them, and you give that to the Squeers. Is basically what he's done. Is he's taken this combined character and broke them out in half, kind of taking some of their traits going one way and some of their traits going the other way. Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, okay, more shopkeepers, more of these lower middle class Londoners that you come across in these Dickensian tales.
Yeah, and it's like the fact that we kind of have these co-protagonist siblings sort of gives a nice nuanced view of like two different types of unfortunate labor conditions in in the Victorian era, but it also would that same thought, because as of yet at least Nicholas and Kate seem to be sharing protagonist duties. It's sort of weird that he gets the title. I don't know if I guess that's a complaint to Dickens himself, and maybe he will eclipse her as the narrative goes on, but 2 episodes in, they seem to have pretty equal footing.
So far in the book, too, they have very equal footing. Like, Dickens didn't kind of skimp out on her story. It is following that similar trajectory.
And I like that we have
between the two.
And I like that we have a spunky female co-protagonist.
Dickens is always good at that. He had, Dickens wrote some very interesting female characters. Like if you look at the Dickens canon, like you have people like Mrs. Haversham and her granddaughter, who for some reason I'm totally blanking on her name right now. You have Nancy, but you also have Mrs. Sowerberry, Widow Corney. Dorrit. Who else do we have in this book here? You have obviously Bob Cratchit and his wife, Mrs. Cratchit.
I feel like most of the ones you are naming, those still are like side characters.
Oh, and hold on. You have Madame Defarge, and Lucy Manette and Miss Pross in Tale of Two Cities. They're pretty big characters. So
Dickens is not unfamiliar with ladies in his stories.
Correct. He does.
Yet aside from Little Dorrit, I can't think of another one who's like actually has the title like of their.
Yeah. They never have the title, but they're like either like secondary lead or like major supporting key plot characters that drive the story. So
yeah,
good on you, Dickens.
Yeah. Anyway, back to our summary. So
correct.
Kate has never worked a day in her life and is bad at this new job, but hopefully she will.
Well, that's why they put her out front in the front of the shop, because she can't sew.
Yeah, but the upper class ladies who are shopping there don't care for dealing with her because she's a klutz.
Yes.
So, can't sew, can't deal with the public. Oh no, what will Kate do? I hope we find out in the next episode. But back
Hopefully
to Yorkshire.
end up like Fontaine.
I was concerned about that. I raised that concern in the last
Mhm.
episode, and we'll see where this is going.
Yes.
But back in Yorkshire.
I dream in time gone by.
So once we have our little Kate interlude, we go back to Yorkshire.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
And Smike has run away. Oh no.
Yes, but before that, there was a moment of the two of them of Nickleby and Smike up in the attic together again, having a nice conversation that inspires him to run away.
That's true. So Nicholas being all like, "Yes, but I'm gonna leave at some point," and and Smike was like, "Oh, if I leave too," less coherent than this, but if I'll leave too, we can find each other and go off into our merry ways, adventures into the sunset, and and because Smike is one of the select few people that Nicholas has empathy for, he's cool with that plan. But then, so Smike runs away, and big calamity over at the not orphanage.
Yes,
and the boarding school.
Yes,
and oh no,
Mr. Squeers has a meltdown.
Yeah, Squeers has a meltdown, but ultimately catches him, ties him by like the chin and hands to this like ladder contraption, and begins spanking him with a switch.
Yes, it's a horrifying contraption that they bring out there. When they first brought it out, I was like, "What the hell is that thing?" Because in the film version, they just slowly string them up. So the fact that they had a whole new contraption for this, I was like, wow, they really invested in this beating scene.
And the kind of resting his chin on the top of it and like slapping him with the switch. Like I imagine he's probably biting his tongue every single time there's impact. Like it was just doubling the pain of it. Like so
it's very much almost kind of like the classic sawhorse from the Spanish Inquisition. That was very similar design, but basically you'd slowly sit and impale yourself on it. This time they're just slowly strapping you to it and whipping you like crazy. So yes, that moment happens. Where
but Nicholas is watching this and he will not take it anymore. So first he tries to peacefully intervene and say, "Mr. Squeers, he's had enough of this monstrosity." Terrible Roger Rees impression. But Mr. Squeers is mad and says, "You get out of here, Nickleby." But Nicholas, because he's so
fed up,
empathetic towards this one person in particular, it was what I was going to say, decides that no, he will not stand by. So he punches Squeers in the face, wrestles the switch out of his hands, and beats Squeers with the switch himself, and creating a big ruckus among all the orphans and children and whatnot. And
Mrs. Squeers and Fanny and the fat child of theirs.
The whole,
I forget the name.
The whole motley crew of the Squeers house. So obviously Nicholas realizes that he can't stay there anymore, so he goes on the run. And who Nicholas does also get
Nicholas also does get a slash to the face.
Right. So. Which I must say, the blood effect on that happens way too quickly. He gets, Squeers hits him on the face, then he instantly has this huge bloody gash. Like, that's not really how blood happens.
I know, but I mean, the fact that they went for that, like, it did shock me when I watched it. I was like, oh, wow. Like, and I had to rewind to figure out how they got, like, how Roger Rees got the blood pack there, because it happens so fast. I was like, did he just have it in his hand? He just got his face with like a bloody handkerchief, and that's how he kind of got it. I don't know. I imagine.
Maybe he had something like up in his sleeve to squirt it across his face.
Maybe.
But very, very quick gash that just like.
Well, it makes sense. Like it's like a birch stick. So it's kind of it would be a quick slash to you, because it's not like a club he's hitting him with. It's like almost like a riding crop. Type tool. So either way, so he gets hit. He runs away.
He runs away
after the tussle.
And then on his way out, he runs into two people separately. First, oh no, it's John, the guy whose fiance he was flirting with a couple scenes ago. It's like, uh-oh. And like, the music is very tense, and you're like, oh no, he's being pursued by John from earlier, who's going to bring him back to Squeers. he's holding a club with something that looks like a club at least.
That's a club, but it's like an old like gnarled piece of wood that he's whittled into a club.
So when John catches up to Nicholas, Nicholas puts up his dukes to defend himself. I've already hit one man today. And John wasn't pursuing him at all. He's just like, hey, you're the guy I met the other day. What a funny coincidence. and when Nicholas, in order to kind of peacock out and defend himself, says that he beat the schoolmaster, John thinks this is just like the funniest thing he ever heard. So he's like laughing, like, this is amazing. You're like my new hero, even though you were flirting with my fiance like a day ago. But cool, good on you, knuckle boy. Here, take some money. And Nicholas is like, oh, I have to refuse your money because I'm so proper. But it's like, you have literally no money. Take some money and take my fancy stick. So, don't judge a book by its cover, because we thought John is a real brute, and he's like, he's
not a bad guy.
So
he's
not a bad guy, and like Squeers is so dislikable that even like guy who's friends with his daughter like thinks it's the funniest thing ever that somebody took physical vengeance against him. So so John goes on his way, Nicholas continues running away, and then who does Nicholas run into next? Is old boy Smike, who I guess has succeeded at escaping again. And there's like this nice little heartfelt moment between our two buddy buds, and Smike quotes Billy Joel and says, "You are my home." And the two of them go off into the sunset together. Thus ends the play, or at least for now.
Which is nice, because once again, it's that symmetry of ending with Smike in Nickleby. Like, that's a nice kind of symmetry of the last episode, ended the same way with them going, like, the last episode ended with them meeting up. This episode ends with them heading off into the unknown together. Yeah. So we'll see where episode 3 ends. Will it always end with Smike?
Well, yeah, so like there's still 7 more parts of this, so this like happily going into the sunset. Clearly they will have more life and adventures.
Oh, absolutely they do.
Create new obstacles. I'm sure. Like I remember I'm experiencing this for the first time. I've never seen a previous miniseries or film version. I haven't read the book. So yeah, like this, if the play had just ended there, I'm like, okay, that's kind of like a cool, 2-hour interesting little character study, and the heroes get away. Good job, but clearly more is in store for them.
Yes,
and I imagine pacing wise, this would have been where the intermission happened in night 1 of the show.
I don't think so, because according to the website, part 1 was 4 hours. With one interval of 15 minutes, it says
we're 2 hours in.
Oh, I guess that's true. So yes, then yes, we would have had this moment. Correct. You are correct.
And this seems like the right moment for a break. So like, I am glad the episode ends here. Like, we've had kind of a whole play's worth of story sort of happen already over these 2 first installments. And yeah, I think this is like a nice little, okay, take a breath. We've had our one big action scene. We've, confirmed that our heroes are all right and on their way. And let's see what happens next. So good episode, I must say. Like
the false hope.
Oh, false hope. Don't give me that. Spoilers.
It's you okay. I won't argue.
No. Speaking of spoilers, something I'll say. So remember how last week I mentioned that I was reading this book by Caird, Laird, The Art of Adapting Victorian Fiction. Well, this book spoiled something for me about the plot.
What did it spoil for you?
Well, I kind of don't want to spoil it here in case people watching. But it's interesting because Laird is talking in this book about various Victorian adaptations of these Dickens novels that were being mass produced and pumped out quickly before the serialized publishing of the novel itself was done. Yeah. So they had to come up with endings. And, one of the points, the one that turned out to be a spoiler for me, is that one of the playwrights successfully predicted a big plot twist that occurs to do with Smike in particular. And Dickens was...
Okay, I know which one
you probably know. Yeah, which that was a surprise to me reading it in that book. And Yeah, so Dickens was quite infuriated by the fact that the playwright swooped in and spoiled it. Like, and they spoiled it not realizing that it was correct. They just thought that would be an interesting dramatic twist, because they need to come up with interesting things to fill their play versions with before they know how Dickens intended to end it. Dickens was real mad that all the theater going public already knew his big plot twist.
Oh, and one thing we did forget to mention in this was that we got to know a little bit more about Mr. Nobbs.
Yeah, a little bit. He kind of he's an interesting character. He's an interesting character to me. He comes in and out, but like,
well, once again, they keep building him up in the story. Like he was one that brought Kate and Mom Nickleby there.
Does she have a name, Mom Nickleby?
I don't think so.
The mother.
Yeah, she's the mother. She's the mother. Let me see. Let me check the book. Nope. She's literally referred to as Mrs. Nickleby in the book.
Mrs. Nickleby. Yeah,
so Mom Nickleby.
It's so awkward anytime we try to refer to her as Nicholas and Kate's mother, Mama Nickleby, Mrs.
Yeah, Mama Nickleby. Name. I'm going for that. But yeah, like he shows up there. There's a little bit more about him at work with Ralph. So once again, like they keep building up this character. So keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on him.
I like how the opening narration made a point of stressing that, in their office together, he has to sit on a high top while Ralph is sitting in like a nice comfier low chair.
It's very Bob Cratchit of him.
It is. Like, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, I was waiting for him to say, "But sir, it's Christmas Eve. What of Tiny Tim?"
I also do love, like, in the book, they make continued reference to the fact that Mr. Nob does the knuckle cracking.
Right. He did that. I didn't know that was a thing. I just there was a very
it's a thing right out of the book. It's a thing that he does right out of the book. So I was happy to see they keep this trait going. It wasn't just the one time in part one where the actor did that hand thing, which is really impressive that he does it. It's like
it's so audible. Like, I wonder if he has a special mic just for his knuckles, like
potentially
hiding in his like shirt cuff, like to really get or did they get him into a Foley studio after the fact and he just cracked his knuckles into a microphone for like an hour and they put that in post?
That could be it.
Because damn, is it audible?
It's so audible, and I love it. I was like, oh good, they actually got that little bit of the Dickens description of the character, that he's this cherry-nosed man that cracks his knuckles. So the fact that they do that. So then, Ryan, just like our last episode where we talked about who our standout was of the cast in the episode, who was your standout this week?
It was an understated one, but it was one that I think kind of quietly stole the show in every scene she was in. That was Janet Dale as Miss Nag, the sort of second command in the seamstress place underneath Antonelli.
Okay, yes. One that was kind of always mimicking the words.
Yeah, finishing everyone's sentences, but just like repeating the last word. Yeah. She was just like so funny. And it's the same performer who was playing one of the Snolly children in the orphanage scenes, or at least in the first.
Very good. Okay.
Was probably in the background of the Yorkshire scenes in this one, but she was just so funny, and every single line of hers started with the last word of whoever she was talking to's previous line, and she just had this like funny way with her, kind of like Miss Nickleby, who I shouted out like in the previous episode. Yeah, there's just these kind of like funny bitty lady characters in this who just, have so much personality at like what seems like really small roles. And I was just really happy with like, I can't tell yet if the Mantinellis and their whole deal is going to be.
I won't spoil it for you because I do know more about their characters.
Yeah, like I can't tell. Was this going to be dangerously abusive, or is this going to be like a foil alternative to Nicholas's situation? Hard to say just yet. I'm sure more likely the former, but don't spoil it for me or viewers at home who happen to be following along. But yeah, I just thought she was a fun character, so that was my shout out for this week.
Yeah.
How about you?
I will say for me, just like last week, how I shouted Alan Armstrong as Mr. Squeers. We're going to stick with the Squeers family. But this time we're going with Suzanne Bertish as Fanny Squeers.
Yeah,
who we briefly encountered in the last episode, and this was really her moment to shine. And I mean, she was just once again great comedic actress, great control of her face. In fact, she kind of has like her dad, the one kind of squinty eye that she's got there. She's got the weird scar on her mouth that they gave her. Like she has a very distinct look to her, and just her comedic reactions to things are great. Like the moment when she gets the tea spilled in her face, like all that great stuff on the double date. Like you said, the pratfall feint that she does, that's very over the top. And but then when she goes evil at the end, she goes like full on like evil hag, which is like great. It was like, okay, I get why you're the way you are right now, but at the same time you are like really ratcheting this up here with like what you're writing to Uncle Ralph there, like. But she was just a great comedic turned villain character. We've got this villain origin story within this piece. It was great. I was like, I get you.
I agree. She was really funny. Like she kind of reminded me of like a circa 6 years ago Kristen Wiig SNL character, sort of like most of the time, like in her very like funny mannerisms and like speech patterns, and the way she's fawning over Nicholas, like, and he just like completely does not compute. Like it had like a real SNL vibe to it, which I thought was funny.
It totally did.
And and because I really don't sympathize with Nicholas's harsh refutation of her, like I don't know if this is so much because the performer herself is bringing in like the sympathy here, or if it's just wow, our protagonist is so unsympathetic in this moment that I can't help feeling for her.
Yeah, I mean, once again, like Dickens does a great job with all his protagonists of not making them totally heroic. They are very gray protagonists, like Sidney Carton in Tale of Two Cities. He's a drunkard, and it's not till the very end of the novel that he has this big moment of redemption, which we're not going to spoil in case you've never read Tale of Two Cities, because it is
I haven't, but I know the basic plot outline.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, Dickens was very good at writing characters who are human. Like they're not these Superman characters. They are people who are flawed. I mean, we could talk about this now, but the very famous punch that Nicholas Nickleby has is a very punch. Yeah, I mean, well, it's not on the poster. It is on the poster, but I don't have the poster behind me today.
Tilt your head back so people can see what you're.
But like here, you have the illustration of the beating scene where Nicholas is fighting back against Mr. Squeers. You can see him there. You got Mrs. Squeers with her broom there. I'm in reverse. There she is. So you have all that going on, and then like even in this lovely book. You even have this scene punch.
Yeah, so like I will say,
iconic moment from the book.
I will say, because I guess I just went into this knowing very little about the plot beats of this novel. Like I didn't know specifically that was coming to me. I didn't realize that was a famous punch until you described it as such. Like it makes sense that is certainly the most action-packed plot point we've had so far, and like big pivots.
It's a turning point in the story.
Happening. And it is like a cathartic moment, I guess, for anyone who's been in one of these abusive boarding schools to like, wouldn't you have loved to just sock the innkeeper in the face or whatever you call him? So
the headmaster,
this is kind of like a Tarantino revenge fantasy playing out in Victorian England, I guess. Yeah,
and I mean, it's very famous in the book because like back then, you never punched a teacher, so the fact that like you have this character who is like full on just wailing on this half blind headmaster who is abusive, so like take that with a grain of salt.
Like I remember when we did our episode on Pipeline by Dominique Morceau, like we had a big discussion on our panel about, was it justified for Omari to shove his teacher? And, there was some like, mixed feelings of the group, but I don't think anyone has mixed feelings in this case. About,
Mr. Squares was it okay for Nick?
Yeah, well, because he was literally inflicting physical violence upon not even a student. Is like Smike is an employee to him, right? He's not even like one of the students at the school.
Yeah, not anymore.
But regardless,
he started out now. He's become a like a lackey for the squeers that
Yeah.
they get to beat on.
It he is mentally challenged, at least in this production, regardless of whether or not
He
he is in
is.
the book or other adaptations.
Well, in
And
the
like,
book,
yeah,
he's
so it's
described
just-
as half-witted. So
yeah, which
we can take as
Victorian
mentally
slang
handicapped,
for
yeah.
mentally handicapped of some
Yes.
kind. But
yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, let's do our squeers check-in, or our, sorry, not squeers, our Smike check-in, because last episode we briefly
how's
touched
Smike
on
doing?
him, and we didn't get too much into his portrayal as done by David Thurfall. Thruffall, who people will note, Thruffall. He starred alongside Jude Law in the thriller Black Seed. So if anybody's seen the thriller Black Seed with Jude Law from 2014, he was in that.
I have not. But Jude Law was in a lot of movies for like a decade. He was like in everything.
He was. He also was in Elizabeth the Golden Age as John Dee, who I don't know who John Dee was. I assume, I assume he was one of the assassins that comes to try to shoot Elizabeth, I think, is where he comes in with that. He has a lot more TV stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's always kind of interesting.
He was in Ripper Street, Troy, Fall of a City, Bing. He did Shameless from 2004 to 2013, where he played Frank Gallagher.
I've never watched that show. I imagine if people recognize him from anything, it'll probably be that. If he had a recurring or main role on that,
he did, but it's not the Shameless, the one that we think of with Emmy Rossum. It is the British comedy show Shameless.
Oh, interesting. Well, all of our friends from across the pond, if you recognize him from the British comedy Shameless.
Yes. So anyway, yes, he is playing Smike in this. And last episode, I had said I wasn't fully sold on his performance as Smike. So, update on this front. I'm still not sold. I still think he's playing this character as too handicapped. Like, the thing is, he's supposed to be mentally handicapped, but he's not supposed to be like Igor from Frankenstein, where he's hunchback, bow-legged, drooling. Like he's someone who is.
He sells the hell out of that drool. I will say that is.
He does. He does, but I feel this is like the '80s version of how they looked at people with special needs or learning disabilities. And to watch this now, this is the one area of the story where I'm like, I don't know if we want to do it this way. Like if we were directing this now, I think there's a much more subtle, better way we could go about.
See, I, for the most part, agree with you. I agree with you for the most part, but I kind of he is at the height of his abuse right now, or at least hopefully this is the height and it doesn't increase as the story goes on. So he's so beaten down, literally and metaphorically, and his joints probably hurt all over. That could maybe account more for the posture and the the flailing of the limbs. I'd be curious to see as we continue these Smike check-ins if he sort of comes more into his own.
I hope he does. I hope he does.
But I also feel like that could be concerning with the way they've characterized him so far, because it kind of just says whatever sort of neurodivergence he has can be cured just by getting away from your bad setting or environment. And that could be a slippery slope. But I kind of think it is what it is. This is a product of the 80s. We would know better now, and more contemporary adaptations probably do a better job of this.
Well, I mean, go watch the 2002 film with Jamie Bell, where Jamie Bell plays Smike, and it's a very he doesn't play him as this bow-legged, drooling man. He's someone who clearly has suffered abuse and isn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, and it does require other people's assistance. But he isn't like what David has done here, where it's like if Nicholas wasn't around to look after this kid who's run away, I would be seriously concerned for his well-being. Jamie Bell at least can believe that there, on some level, he is smart enough and physically able enough to get away twice and is able to kind of survive a bit.
But I think it's worth I don't know if that's a flaw that
Mm-hmm.
we'd be very concerned for him on his own, because that sort of raises the stakes of why these two need each other, or why Smike needs Nicholas.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's sort of the walking around with a baby through the apocalypse sort of trope
Yes.
of like Baby Yoda, we could say, for the most recent example. Sorry, Grogu. But yeah, like it is something vulnerable that requires our protagonist's constant vigilance and protection, because we know that Smike wouldn't be okay on his own. I use the term "save the cat" kind of glibly in our last episode, but yeah, we have a real sort of save the cat moment here, much more literally. Well, not literally, because he's not a cat, but yeah, he is this kind of symbol of pure innocence that does require Nicholas's help if he is going to make it in this world, and not just get caught again, because when he tried escaping on his own, he didn't last long. He was very easily pursued and brought back.
Yeah.
So now
so very true, very
go
true.
better this time with Nicholas by his side.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we will keep tracking our Smike.
Smike check-in.
The Smike check-ins to kind of see what we're thinking of this performance, because I think this will be the most challenging and divisive performance that people will watch and kind of go, they either like this portrayal or they go, this is just bad 80s here. Which, I mean, it's not even about like the fact that he physically does this, and he's one of the few people who, like Roger Rees as Nicholas Nickleby, only plays one character. So
well, and I think it would be very challenging for him to fluctuate characters. Like, he's in it. Like, like, and I don't know if it's like Roger, he's just only has one role because he's just in it so much. We'll kind of see as it seems like he's certainly becoming a much more central character. And I think these Smike check-ins will just become much more fluidly integrated as we go, because I imagine our entire, at least the next chapter, will be all about, our two
on the
buddy road trip. Kind of. I was going to call it like buddy road trip comedy, but I feel like, is it a comedy? Probably not. There might be some humorous moments.
There will be some humorous moments for sure.
Of course, but these two definitely have some challenges ahead of them. But it's not. I think the whole idea of the Smike check-in came from the place of, in the first episode, he was very peripheral, and what's going on with this guy who is probably important, but we're not sure why yet. So
absolutely. And I mean, like, okay, so now let's get into adaptation check, because just like last episode, I am currently the literary manager for this series, because I am reading along in the book, and I can now say that the book and the play have now caught up to each other. Last week we were a little bit ahead. Like, I had gotten up to the fact that Nicholas Nickleby and Smike had headed off down the road together. That's kind of where
you haven't read any more of the book since last week. Okay, so
because I read so far ahead that I was like, okay, I could take a breather this week, work on some other projects that we have to do. So I was like, okay, that's okay. We can breathe here. And now this weekend I'll do some more reading or listening to my audio. But either way, like,
that's
like it's been once again, it's a very faithful adaptation still. Like, the description they give for the new lodgings for Mama Nickleby and Kate, the drafty apartment, right out of the book. Once again, like, this adaptation very clearly takes direct dialogue and direct descriptions from the book. Some of the like internal speaking, like Nicholas has, to camera in this version is once again some internal monologue that we do get from the book. So that is still very much following the book in the sense of the elements of the story. So we are not diverging. There's been no major bits of the story that have been cut yet. I mean, obviously they've shrunken some of the stuff, like consolidated it so it's not as long in the book. Like just how, like, in the first part, like the chapter on crumpets and muffins was greatly shrunk when we got to the play. So there's a little bit of that, but like we're still basically following all the beats of the story. So far that's good. I mean, I know, Ryan, you were concerned about the narration, and I found there was a lot less of it this time.
Certainly less, and that, like, the book that I quoted that line from last time by Vincent Murphy, like, certainly did attest to the fact that it has to front load a lot of kind of information, and then as it goes on, it certainly becomes more expedient. I still don't love the device of the Fleabag in third person, as we can call it, where, turning to camera to directly monologue on your thoughts, but doing it from the perspective of an omniscient third person narrator. Like, I get that it's a creative choice, and I'm not going to be like, why would they do this? Like, I understand the reasoning.
Why, John Caird? Why, Trevor Nunn? Why would you do such a thing?
It's more David Edgar than anyone. Like, this is a script decision. But, like, yes. I do think that, it kind of, something about it rubs me the wrong way. And I think and it comes from a place of fidelity of, like, the book has a third person narrator, and this is how we retain that sense of omniscience. But when you do put it in the voices of the actors saying, Nicholas was very concerned that this woman seems to be attracted to him, but he doesn't understand. Like, I think a more impressive move in adaptation would be to take those passages and be, what did they sound like in Nicholas's own first person? And let's hear his actual thoughts from his voice. And same with Kate, same with whoever else we get them from, as opposed to just, copy paste this whole chunk of text and give it to Roger because he happens to be on stage right now. Like,
yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to make peace with it. Like, I think it is just what it is, but I was hoping that it would grow on me more, and 2 episodes in, it still hasn't.
Well, we got another 8 to go, or no, 7. We have another 7 to go. So
yes. And if they do become less and less obtrusive as it goes on, it'll be easier to make peace with.
Yes, very true.
I will kind of be curious if a lot of the things that were heavily, narrated in the first chapter, like if they ever do really pay off, and then that kind of does raise the question of how necessary was it to have all that narration at the beginning, like the opening Greek chorus all about how Ralph came about his money. Like, we could just
I agree. You do need a little bit of that Greek chorus in the opening to kind of get the story moving, and that is once again pulled right from the first chapter of the book. So it was very kind of, I do agree with that opening narration, but the other ones, it's like, like the first episode they were way heavier with it. Like, I hope it's a diminishing narration return, where it's like as we get further along, like, because the scenes that didn't have the narrations, they moved. They were easy to follow. They had a good pace to them
because it's drama. Like, it's dramatized. They take things that might have been long slugs of narration and just like quippily put it into voices of characters through dialogue, and that's what playwriting for the most part is. Like, and so I find it is often used as a crutch in places where it doesn't need to be. Like I think a lot of it kind of, and this is why I sort of do pin it on David Edgar more so than
Nunn and
like
Caird.
certainly not and certainly not the actors themselves either. They're just reading the script, and I don't know to what extent they had like input in the workshopping of this, but it to me it feels like a mistrust of the actors on the part of the playwright and the directing, like, to how will we know that Nicholas isn't attracted to Fanny if he doesn't just turn and tell us? Like, we can tell from acting and body language, and I think it comes from a place of fear that, will this read? Is the actor talented enough to convey this? And I don't think we need all of that.
Yes, very true. And then one more new segment I'm adding in to this is our Les Mis check-in, because as we did in the last episode, where we acknowledged that this is the same creative team that will go on and do Les Mis a few years from when they did this.
It's very, very similar plot-wise.
Yes, correct. Similar plot-wise. It has very similar costumes. It even has some of the same actors who will go on to be in Les Mis.
So can I kick off our Les Mis check-in here?
Yes. What is our Les Mis check-in? What was the first thing that stood out to you as a parallel?
Smike is Cosette.
Ooh! I didn't catch that one. That's a good one.
Because if Nicholas is Art Valjean, who does he save from the Thénardiers, the Squeers? Cosette,
Very good.
I didn't see that coming last time, but now that we are following this thread of intertextuality, like that's So
that's
I'm looking forward to a scene set 10 years from now when Smike is being courted by someone and Nicholas doesn't know if he can trust the suitor.
Yeah, no, I didn't catch that one. The one I caught was clearly the end of the day sequence was pulled from Nicholas Nickleby with the Mintonelli staff, like the female staff that all come out in
Yes.
their work shirts and aprons and the head shawls. Like I was like, oh wow, did they literally just like take the same costumes? Like it's like literally they all came in. And I was like, dun 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 dun. dun. I was like, and I was like, okay, so the next episode we're definitely gonna get some more of these women picking on Kate, aka our Fontaine, in the
Kate
situation.
is definitely Fontaine. There's no kind of two ways about that.
Yeah, and your highlight character from that will obviously be the factory woman who steals the letter. So like there's some great So like that was like another one where I was like, okay, we got that going now. So like it's like there was that parallel. I was like, okay, clearly we're pulling some more stuff from that part of the story. Yeah, and then I mean now you say like Smite pulling the Cosette moment from that, and actually even the fact that they walk off hand in hand, I was like, that's how that sequence ends in Les Mis too. Like Valjean walks off with Cosette on the turntable, and then it transitions to the da dun 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 Paris 10 years later.
Yeah, like I think it was easy to miss one because Smike is not a little girl, so it's not like the clear one-to-one comparison, but it's a different setup for that rescue, even if it plays off the same way, insofar as Valjean wasn't also a resident at the Thénardiers when he decided that he's going to leave with Cosette. He shows up and just be like, I am here on behalf of Mother.
Yes.
Terrible attempt at a Valjean impression.
Oh, here I have another one I just figured out now. The whole Nickleby and Squeer sequence in this is very similar to what happens with Valjean when he gets out on parole and he starts tussling with people in the village before the bishop comes in and saves him.
Kind of.
There's that very famous line of like a cur I walk the street, not worth the dirt beneath their feet is the lyric, and it's that same thing of and then he gets into fights with the innkeeper, he gets into fights with the farmer that he labors for. I was like, like this is a very similar.
Which in a way, this is, because this comes before Les Mis and like the the production history, like it's kind of an interesting economy of detail to make all of those random characters also the Thénardiers.
Yeah,
like,
that is true.
Conflating these things better than like a little better economy there.
Well, I mean, once again, this is you can see why Cameron Mackintosh turned to this group and said, "Let's mount this French opera, basically." Together, and it's like you couldn't have picked a better team at that time. I mean, you got John Caird, Trevor Nunn, John Napier, and Nickleby was big, so everybody knew about this production. I'm sure Cameron Mackintosh went and saw it, so I'm sure when he was like, "I need somebody for this,"
and it's all RSC, like it's the same. I don't think he had to like approach them specifically. I think it was kind of a no-brainer. Who do we have on the RSC staff who's perfectly equipped for this? Like,
I think if I remember correctly, Trevor Nunn and John Caird were leading the RSC at the time, and
I think you're right about that. So.
Yeah, it was kind of like a Des Mackinoff, Antonici Molino situation, with the two of them kind of leading the company. So. They were kind of teamed up again. But that's our Les Mis check-in.
Before we leave the Les Mis check-in, I hinted at this one last time, and it certainly has paid off here. Speaking of just the Thénardier Squeers comparison, Fanny is Eponine, very clearly. Like a less sympathetic Eponine. It's like what if Eponine was... But like, what if Eponine was like super gross and unappealing, and Marius has very good reason to not be into her, like as opposed to the actual Eponine who's just like, oh no, Marius, what are you doing? She's obviously the perfect choice.
Well, I mean, like in the book, Eponine is described more as a Fanny character. Like she's supposed to be very homely, not supposed to look as beautiful as she does when she's played by many a stunning actress, whether it's Lea Salonga, Francis Raphael, Samantha Park.
Like they only cast attractive people to play Eponine, and like maybe that isn't the best choice in adaptation.
You got to go more the Fanny route. You got to make her a little bit more homely, a little bit less appealing. And I mean, this is kind of like Eponine if she didn't have an unexplained change of heart from the first part, because in the first part of the musical, when you meet her, she's picking on Cosette, very much kind of enjoying the luxuries of profiting off of Fantine's plight. And yet somehow by the time we get to the 10 years later in Paris, she's now become once again the prostitute with the heart of gold, that type of situation. There's somehow in that gap of 10 years, she's had a change of heart of her parents' occupation. Don't know what happened there. But this is kind of like Fanny if she had stuck with her Thénardier lineage of being as bad as they come, you know. So definitely there. Like, Fanny is still very much the Eponine, but she's the evil Eponine. She's kind of like the anti-Eponine.
Right. If Eponine met Marius while still with her parents, as opposed to breaking free, kind of. Correct.
Exactly. Exactly. So I love that. So so we'll definitely keep going with these Les Mis check-ins, because I do find them funny when you're watching to find these random little tiebacks to where this production was going, and the fact that, like, clearly they took a lot of, or not, I want to say they stole, because they directed both, so they didn't plagiarize themselves. So
before we leave the Les Mis check-in, it's not a comparison that has been drawn yet, but one that I'll be curious to see if it comes up on the horizon. We've yet to have we've yet to have a Javert archetype. That is like the one major character of Les Mis that I don't think we've seen yet in this. So I'm curious what there be some kind of...
I can already think of someone who will become that person, so I'm already watching them, so keep an eye.
Okay.
I already kind of know who that's likely going to become that parallel.
Okay, so put a pin in that till a future Les Mis check-in. But I just thought, that might be the one area, if there is no, morally, rigid inspector who's chasing Nicholas and Smike. But if there is, then oh well, you tried to keep it separate.
You tried. Yeah. I mean, other than that, any final thoughts, Ryan? I mean, what are you looking forward to in the next episode?
Well, kind of just before we do final thoughts, that one last check-in that we kind of started last time too is, how do you feel about episodically this hour-long segment standing on its own, or being like a good episode of television, basically?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought this one flew a lot faster. Like, I didn't realize I was already like 40 minutes in before I did a time check. I went, oh wow, this episode's moving a lot faster. I felt it was well paced. The fact that we pick up almost right where we leave off. I thought it was well balanced between the Caird and Nicholas stories. Like, we're moving them along at a decent rate with each other, that you can feel like they are literally like living parallel lives. And then I think it ends on a good spot too. Like, as you said, it accumulates in where an intermission would end up if we were watching the actual 4-hour part 1 production. So, which I'm surprised only has one 15-minute intermission. I would think in a 4-hour night,
2 hours.
Maybe we'll want to put a little bit more intermission in there, or make it like a half-hour break, so like all audiences have a chance to use the washroom, because in 15 minutes we know there's not enough time for everybody.
Everyone is going to be charging at the washroom.
Exactly.
After they just got themselves all riled up, cheering on Nicholas in that punch.
I know, I love that. That was like, once again, this audience interaction is great.
Well, yeah, I do like that this is just like a kind of good quality of pro shot that cuts to the audience and shows them cheering in that moment. Like, as opposed to like, the one of the worst pro shots, not the worst production, but worst pro shot we reviewed on this show was the Oklahoma one that filmed a version of it with the audience to cut to only at like curtain moments, but otherwise was completely silent the whole time, because they clearly filmed most of it without the audience. And wow, this is the most unresponsive audience ever when the cast is like giving these musical numbers. They're all Oklahoma. that was an interesting one.
Funny enough, also directed by Trevor Nunn.
Yes, which we talked about there too.
Yes.
But yeah, in terms of my thoughts on like the episodic, how does this hour fare? I agree. Like, I think this was a really well paced one. I do think if it was an hour of television as opposed to just an hour excerpt from a play, I think we could do more cross cutting between Nicholas and Kate's storyline. We very much had 30 minutes of Nicholas, 20 minutes of Kate, last 10 minutes.
Yeah, you
of
definitely
Nicholas.
could intercut them more if you were doing
But that's harder to do in the theater, so I recognize that this isn't the place for it. But if this was like, because we are watching it as television, very much like this weekly segments, like I think a TV adaptation would find more of like the beats where those two stories can be intercut better. But the thing that really kind of sold me on this hour stands alone quite well is kind of full circle framing with the character of John, as we talked about a little already, but how we have the whole encounter, with the bridge game early on, where he really, Nicholas gets, runs afoul of this guy who, we expect him to be maybe an antagonistic force as this goes on because he is flirting with his fiance. And then when he comes back at the end during a very tense moment, and you think, he's gonna be the one who's like, oh, Nickel boy, I did not care for you earlier, so now I'm gonna bring you back to squares. But then we have this like, anti-payoff that pays off in a very different way of, ha ha ha, I'm such a charming guy and you misjudged me, and here's some money and a stick. So like, the fact that we saw that character very briefly in episode 1, but he didn't become developed until the beginning of this episode is a very, very good like structural like if you were like making a TV adaptation of this in 9 episodes, like this is a very good standalone episode.
Agreed. I mean, like you forget you meet him and Fanny in episode 1 because they're so brief at the tail end of the episode. And also
Fanny's a little more memorable. Tilda comes in with him. Tilda and John are like, they're there.
Tilda and John, like they're there in the first episode, but you don't get a lot of them. It's kind of like Smike, where once again you're like, I know you're important, but I don't know when you're going to show up to make a bigger thing. Just like Mrs. McCreevy as well. Like she also is one of those characters that kind of shows up, and it's like, I don't fully know where you're going with this.
You just have too much going on. You're getting a little too developed to be a minor character. Like, clearly which I wouldn't have said the same about Tilda and John in the previous episode. But I do like, even if we never see them again, we may or may not, but I feel like their kind of little arc could be complete, and what we've seen in like this could just be the Tilda and John episode. And like I'm happy with that. I'm sure we'll at least see Tilda again because Fanny has her villain origin in this episode and is going to clearly become more of a prominent force, and Tilda is her dear friend, and if Tilda's there, John will probably be there too. But I am very happy with this. Is just the John arc has come and gone and was the framing device for this episode.
Keep an eye on John. I'll just say keep an eye on John.
Okay, looking forward to him.
He may become kind of like the Angera to Nickleby's Marius.
Okay, wow, that feels like a spoiler there. I almost would have liked to be surprised by that.
You'll see. Okay. Sorry, I just maybe less of an Angera, more of a Grantaire.
Okay. Cool.
That's
picturing where this might go.
That's a bit of an analogy. I mean, Grantaire from Les Mis is the one that's always dressed in green. It is the drunk one of the group.
Yeah. Okay.
So keep an eye on him. Yeah, keep an eye on Mr. on Mr. John there. He is a character that is quite interesting.
All right, we'll save that discussion till our next Les Mis check-in. But overall, I was very happy with just the structural pacing of this episode in particular. I think I will be very surprised if they can keep this up because as we said last time, it was not intended to be viewed in these segments. So the fact that this felt like a very satisfying episode in its own right, I will be very surprised if we can say the same about every single one moving forward.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think next episode will definitely be the test because technically next episode will be start of Act 2, and then we're going to break midway through the second act of Part 1. So we'll see how well they break that moment.
which is what the previous one was, and we both agreed last time that that was like a fine place to break it. Worked.
Yeah. Once again, like that kind of felt more like a TV pilot where it's like we got to introduce and do a lot of the exposition, so it felt like a good spot where it's like, hey, I feel the board with a lot of the major characters is now being set. We're good to go. Even if we, once again, as you said, we meet with them briefly, but like once again, that board was set in the first episode, and now we got to see the pieces move on the board a little bit more.
Yeah, it was very much like, okay, you've met everyone, cool, take a break, and we will come back with them next time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, sorry. So you asked before. I just wanted to make sure we had the pacing episode by episode check-in.
Yeah, no, that's important.
Yeah,
so they're good catching that.
So you asked what was your like kind of last question you wanted to ask? Was it just like a last
final thoughts?
Something you liked?
Final thoughts before we head out for because we've hit the hour and a little bit over mark. So it's the perfect time to kind of start wrapping this one up. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they're supposed to be duet.
I don't. That's okay. Duet does it. Yeah, we try to keep them under an hour, but some episodes will give us more to say than others, and I think this one definitely had a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, so overall, I have no big final thoughts. I was happy with this one. Looking forward to seeing where it goes. I do feel like we've kind of, in a way, reached the end of Act 1 with, the big inciting incident of, or the sort of secondary incitement, the punch has happened, and now our heroes are on the road for presumably the adventures of the title to ensue. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out.
Agreed. I mean, this felt like a great natural conclusion. The first two clearly, episode 1, episode 2 clearly go together and make up the first act of part 1. So, I mean, this was a nice kind of accumulation now where it's like, you're right. Like now it does feel like we're heading off into the road show of Act 2 of part 1. So we're definitely now we're going to see more of Kate's story now that she's got to the first episode we didn't set her up too much. This episode really much set her story up of, okay, let's see how far down the ladder she goes before Nicholas shows up again in her life and rescues her.
Spoiler.
It's not a spoiler.
We don't know that that's going to happen.
We're equating her to Fantine in this situation. Fantine has to suffer a bit before Valjean shows up and saves her again. Well, now that her story's been set up.
We don't know. Just because we know what happens in Les Mis doesn't mean this has to follow the exact same roadmap. And while I do certainly expect her to suffer, I was not certain that Nicholas would save her. They kind of do have these divergent paths that may or may not.
Well, we know eventually they got to all meet up again. I mean, that the filming does have to get back together somehow.
Well, in like a perfect sort of neatly tied up melodramatic way, sure. But, Dickens was known for pushing back against a lot of the melodramatic tropes of his day, which is part of what did frustrate him about those dinosaur adaptations that were really putting the melodrama back into it, especially when they had to decide their own endings halfway through publication. So I wasn't gonna assume that it's going in the obvious predictable way, but we will see.
We will see. But there we go. We will leave it there. Just as Smike and Nickleby hit the road, we will see you on the road next week with episode 3 of Nicholas Nickleby. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in for episode 2 of 9. We will see you all next week. In the meantime, Ryan, give us that classic social media send-off.
I'm not active on social media, so just follow Cup of Hemlock, share the love there. Literally everything I post is just sharing Cup of Hemlock stuff anyway. And please like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. If you're enjoying this series, get in the comments and tell us how much you enjoyed this or that episode of Nicholas Nickleby. Keep this dialogue going.
Indeed. Yes. You can follow me at Mackenzie Corner on all social media platforms. You also can follow my podcast, Before the Downbeat. Ryan, why don't you tell the audience before we go a little bit about our sonnet series that we've launched?
Yes. So we have launched here at Cup of Hemlock Shakespeare sonnet reading series, which we're doing our best to compile 154 actors, performers, poets, theater enthusiasts of all stripes to come together digitally, of course. And each one of them will choose a sonnet from a list that we have below, link in the description if you would like to participate. You select a sonnet, it's very easy, and just make a short video of yourself reading the sonnet, followed by a few words about your own relationship to theater and why you think theater is important today. And we're really trying to create like a fun connecting project to renew a lot of people's hope for the state of theater during this pandemic. So we encourage anyone watching this to get in the description, follow that link. We would love to have you participate, even if we don't know you personally. 154 is a big number, so help us fill it, and we will promote you and your performance on this very channel that you're watching right now.
Absolutely. So check that out, and until next time, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe, and have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye.